What if Thanksgiving, supposed to be the warmest homecoming of the year, started with a house as cold as a freezer and a note on the counter that read, "We went on a cruise. You handle him." A family turning the care of a dying man into something they can toss aside, leaving one person alone in the dark, with nothing but broken breaths and a stepfather shivering for his life. And the most terrifying part isn't the cold. It's the truth they didn't leave by accident. They left with a purpose: to let him die. Before we dive into today's story, let us know where you're tuning in from. It's always amazing to see where our stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next twist in this journey. Now I'd like you to hear what he's been carrying in his heart. I was 31 when I finally bought myself a piece of peace. A real one. Not something borrowed, not rented, not offered with strings attached. It wasn't a palace, but it was mine. I was sitting in a terminal in Denver between flights, the overhead announcements half fading into background noise. My phone was in my hand, fingers curled tight around it like I was bracing for impact. And maybe I was. I just didn't know it yet. 2 months ago, I bought a cabin near Lake Chelan. A modest A-frame tucked among the pines with a rocky path leading down to the water and a fireplace built from old local stone. It was quiet, remote enough to be left alone, but not so far you'd fall off the map. And that was the point. I bought it in cash under my name only. No co-signers, no witnesses, no group chats. Just me. There was no Instagram post. No celebratory family dinner. I didn't even mention it to my mother Gail or my father Wade, which in their world was practically an act of war. But I had my reasons. When I'd finally furnished the place, it looked like it had always belonged to me. A thick gray blanket on the couch. A rocking chair on the porch I'd assembled myself, the kind that made a satisfying creak with every breath of wind. A mug rack by the stove, 2 coffee mugs I actually liked. A wall hook just for the cabin keys. I even had a small sign made for the mudroom, "No drama beyond this point." It was the only inside joke I let myself have. I didn't keep the cabin secret because I was afraid. I kept it secret because I was certain if they knew they'd ruin it. My family didn't believe in boundaries. They believed in debt, not financial, emotional. Guilt dressed up as gratitude. Wade always said, "You owe the people who raised you." Gail wielded sarcasm like a blade, always with that smile that never reached her eyes. Another new jacket, huh? Guess your little passion project's paying off. My younger sister Delaney had made tearing me down into an Olympic sport. She didn't have a career, she had a vendetta. Her fiancé Grant was a sponge with a nice haircut, always agreeing with Gail and Wade in the hope of inheriting their favor. Our cousin Tyson laughed at everything they said. Never once had my so-called family celebrated a single one of my accomplishments without minimizing it first. When I'd gotten a promotion, must be nice to be handed things. When I declined a family trip to catch up on rest, God forbid you show up for anyone but yourself. When I offered help, well, of course you should. You're the man of the family, right? That cabin was the only thing I hadn't invited them into, and that made it sacred. The only people who knew were Mara, my wife, and Junie, my best friend since high school. Mara didn't deal in emotional blackmail. She lived in reality with boundaries and logic, and when she drew a line, it didn't move. She respected mine too, which meant everything. Junie was sharper than she looked, always recording things others wanted to pretend hadn't happened. She knew the difference between proof and paranoia. She'd stood in the fire with me before. When she said something was wrong, I listened. At the moment, I was headed across the country for a short work event. Denver was just the layover. Mara was staying behind on the west coast, not too far from Chelan, but still there was no reason for concern. I had never shared the cabin address with my family. The digital lock had a unique passcode only Mara and I knew. There were no spare keys hidden, no breadcrumb trail. So when my phone buzzed with 5 missed messages from Junie, I didn't panic. Not yet. Her last text froze me. "Open your inbox now. Don't call anyone. Watch it. All of it." I clicked the video attachment. The screen lit up with soft golden lighting. A familiar flicker of the stone fireplace. Voices. Laughter. Champagne glasses clinking. And then it hit me like a gut punch. It was my cabin. and they were celebrating inside it. The lights in the airport lounge felt colder now. Everything around me blurred the scraping of suitcase wheels on tile, the distant call for a final boarding group. My eyes stayed locked on the video. Uni had recorded it from outside the front window, probably crouched behind one of the pine trees. Her phone had a zoom that brought every movement into brutal clarity. Inside my cabin, my family was throwing a full-blown party. The fireplace roared. Music pumped through the Bluetooth speakers I'd just set up last week. The kitchen counter was covered in snack platters. Champagne was flowing. Confetti already littered the floor. Someone had moved my rocking chair inside. Shoes lay kicked off by the door like the place belonged to them. They hadn't just visited. They were living in it. Delaney twirled a champagne bottle like she'd won something. "Finally a place worth celebrating," she said with a smirk. "Too bad it's not even his." My mother chimed in, toasting with a cruel grin. "At least someone's getting use out of this place. Unlike my son wasting his life chasing some dream." Wade added, "What has he ever done that wasn't thanks to us?" Their voices stung, but it wasn't new. What shattered me was that they were saying it there, in the one place I'd kept them out of, the only place they hadn't stained. I paused the video. Rewound. That's when I caught it. A voice, Grant's, I think, bragging, "Relax. Got the backup code." The realtor left it in the lockbox. Then Delaney laughing. "The code's still the same from the listing. Idiot didn't even change it." My stomach dropped. I had never shared the code. But I had forgotten to delete the temporary lockbox listing after closing. It was a rookie mistake, something I hadn't even thought of. A tiny crack in the armor, and they'd slithered through it. I could have jumped on the next flight back. But something in me held still. Instead, I forwarded the video to Mara. I wrote one line. "They're in the cabin. I'm stuck in Denver. Watch this." I knew myself. If I walked into that cabin in the state I was in, I wouldn't yell, I'd detonate. And the story would shift. They'd paint me as unstable, overreacting, threatening, unhinged. It was always how they spun it. This time I wanted control. Mara called immediately. Her voice was low but sharp. "Is it titled in your name only? Yes. Can you send the purchase docs and lock info right now, already in your inbox?" She paused. "Do you want to handle this legally?" "Yes." She didn't hesitate. "Then I'm calling the sheriff's office. I'll meet them there." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, someone was standing up with me, and it was my wife. I kept watching the video. Then came the line that chilled me more than anything else. Gail, my mother, lifted her glass again. "He can hide it all he wants. This place'll be ours anyway. You think they'll stay married? Please. It's only a matter of time." That wasn't drunken spite. That was belief. That was entitlement. This wasn't a spontaneous invasion. This was premeditated. They believed, truly believed, that my home would become theirs. That it already was. Mara's final text buzzed in. 1 hour. I'll be there with law enforcement. I sat there in an airport full of strangers staring at a phone screen that had just torn my world open. And all I could think was, who told them about the cabin? And worse, what else do they think they're entitled to? When Mara walked into the cabin with 2 sheriff's deputies behind her, the music stopped mid-beat like someone had yanked the needle off a record. And just like that, all the fake laughter and champagne bubbles in the air turned into tension thick enough to choke on. But I wasn't there yet. Let me back up. I was still at the Seattle airport, sitting at gate C-14, white-knuckling my phone. The message from Mara had come in just after boarding was announced. "Don't call them. Don't send a message. Don't give them anything to use. Let me and the deputy handle it." I trusted her. I did. But trust doesn't quiet that reflex in your gut when you've spent a lifetime watching your own family manipulate reality like stage magicians. They were good at it. Very good. They could steal your coat and convince you you'd handed it to them. Mara had gone to the Chelan County Sheriff's Office in person that morning. She brought videos, the ones my friend sent me, clips of Gail doing shots in front of the fireplace, Grant waving a bottle over his head like he owned the place. Delaney twirling around with confetti in her hair saying, "This is how we do it when the owner's away." She showed the deputy the cabin's address, the property records with my name on them, and the messages between us confirming I was still out of town. She told them calmly, "I'm not here for a fight. I just want them removed. I want this on record in case they come back." By the time she and the deputies reached the edge of the pine forest, the sun was beginning to dip behind the mountains. Shadows stretched long across the gravel drive as they pulled up to the cabin. The golden light hit the windows just right, reflecting the silhouettes of people moving around inside. Mara's hand hovered over her phone again, texting me, "Deep breath. No fire. Let's make this clean." And then she walked up those steps and opened the door. Inside, the place still reeked of cheap Prosecco and wood smoke. There were red Solo cups on the counter, glitter on the armchairs, and a bottle of champagne mid-pop in Grant's hand. Gail was perched near the fire like a queen on a throne. Wade sat back in my leather recliner, legs crossed like he was settling in for a football game. Tyson leaned awkwardly against the far wall. The second Mara stepped in, their expressions cracked. The playlist stopped. Delaney's jaw dropped. Gail's face twisted like she smelled something rotten. But Mara didn't flinch. "Who invited you in?" she asked calmly. "Who gave you permission to be here?" Wade started to open his mouth, but a deputy stepped forward. "This is a trespassing investigation," he announced. "Unless someone can show proof of consent from the property owner, we'll have to ask you to leave immediately." That's when Grant tried it. Always the opportunist. He pulled out his phone and said, "Look, I have a voicemail from Crosby. He said we could stay here whenever." He hit play. The message sounded just like me, except it wasn't. It was a clipped audio missing context, spliced maybe. It was my voice, but I never said anything about them having free rein while I was gone. At best, it was manipulated. At worst, a flat-out lie. Mara didn't blink. She raised her own phone and played the video of them chanting, "The king's away, let the wolves play," while throwing streamers into the air. She then handed the deputy the property deed with my name on it. The deputy looked back at the group. "I'm calling the owner now." He stepped outside and I answered on the first ring. "No," I said flat. "I did not give them permission. They were never allowed in." Back inside, Wade stood up and puffed out his chest. "You've got some nerve. He owes everything to this family. This cabin wouldn't exist without us. It should belong to all of us." Mara didn't move an inch. "Whatever you think he owes you, that's a family matter. But this is a legal matter, and this property is his. The law doesn't bend for blood," the deputy confirmed. "Disputes over ownership don't make trespassing legal." Then Mara spotted it. Delaney's phone screen still open to a story post. A tagged location, cabin party, Lake Chelan. She turned to the deputy again. "They posted this publicly. This place could be swarmed by strangers. We're not just dealing with trespass now. This is a security risk." The deputy didn't argue. He made his voice louder this time. "Everyone grab your things and leave. If you resist, you will be detained. You are not to return unless given written permission by the owner." The exodus was messy. Gail muttered curses under her breath. Wade stiffened like someone trying to leave with their dignity intact. Delaney stomped out without a word. Grant, suddenly quiet, followed behind. Tyson looked down and avoided eye contact. But it wasn't over. As Mara and the deputy walked one last loop through the cabin to ensure everyone was gone, she noticed something that stopped her cold. A drawer in the living room, one we never use, was cracked open. Inside, paperwork had been shuffled. A manila folder misaligned some documents bent at the corners. Her stomach dropped. At the same moment, my phone buzzed again. It was a notification from my credit monitoring service. Suspicious login detected for associated property account. If they were just here to party, why were they digging through files? If they just wanted champagne and music, why were they looking for passwords? I didn't have the full picture yet. But one thing was clear. They came for more than a celebration. The next morning, the world outside looked like peace, but inside I knew better. Lake Chelan lay quiet under a silver sheet of mist. The gravel road crunched beneath our tires. Pine needles lined the porch like confetti left behind by a storm. From the outside, the cabin looked undisturbed, but the peace was a lie. Something had been broken, and no amount of pine-scented air could put it back. I walked in first. The air inside was stale and sour. The remnants of the party were still there, but I didn't care about the mess. What got me was the feeling. They were here, in my safe place, laughing. This wasn't just a home, it was a decision I'd made to put space between me and them. And they had stomped all over it. Mara walked behind me. She wasn't emotional. She was focused. Start with the entry points, she said. Then check drawers, files, tech. Look for anything moved. She was thinking like someone who understood what these people were capable of. I took pictures of the front lock, the back door. There were faint scuffs near the latch like it had been opened too many times. The lockbox outside the one we used for emergencies was crooked. Its lid scratched, almost pried. Inside drawers were half open, one of them clearly rummaged through. The bedroom nightstand had shifted. My phone charger unplugged. Then I saw it. The manila folder where I kept photocopies of cabin documents. The deed, mortgage, letter, title, confirmation was out of order. One sheet was missing. A note I'd scribbled with the lockbox code, contact info for the realtor, and my email tied to the purchase. Gone. That was it. That was what they were after. They weren't partying. They were looking for access, leverage, proof. Maybe something they could use to claim a share or make it look like I'd given it to them. Mara sat down with me, calm and razor sharp. She asked, what were they really here for? What's missing that would let them spin this around on you? What could they use to hit your finances, your ownership? We called Junie our friend, who's basically a human firewall. She scrubbed through the party videos and paused on one frame. Tyson, standing weirdly close to the cabinet back, turned, pretending to sip from a cup. He wasn't partying. He was waiting, watching, searching. Then the trap snapped shut. My phone buzzed again. Unrecognized login attempt on your backup email. New credit inquiry detected. I hadn't applied for anything. They were already making moves. Mara didn't wait. She walked me through everything. We changed every password, enabled two-factor authentication, called the credit bureaus and froze my file, notified my bank. I replaced the lockbox and switched the cabin's smart code. It was the first time I felt like I was doing something, not just reacting. But we weren't done. I sat with my laptop retracing how they even found the address. I realized my photo from a month ago, just a sunset over the lake, had been in the family group chat. Maybe they put it together. Or maybe they had someone feeding them details from the real estate office. They hadn't guessed the code. They came with it in hand. And now the worst part. The spin had already begun. A cousin messaged me. Hey, I heard you kicked the whole family out with cops. Bit extreme, don't you think? Someone else chimed in. They were just trying to spend Thanksgiving together. The version of the story where I was the villain was already making the rounds. But I didn't argue. Not this time. I saved the evidence. I filed the photos. I backed up the videos. And I started building my own version, one that couldn't be rewritten. Because they hadn't just crossed a boundary. They tried to rewrite the story of who I was. And this time I was ready to tell it myself. In a town as small as Chelan, reputation sticks to you like pine sap. Once it's on you, good luck getting it off. The day after we cleared them out of the cabin, I walked into the corner store to grab some coffee and batteries. The bell above the door chimed and 3 heads turned my way like I'd walked in wearing prison stripes. The cashier didn't say a word. The older couple by the freezer section exchanged a look and whispered. A man standing near the coffee urn cleared his throat and suddenly found the floor fascinating. And just like that, I knew. The conflict had shifted. It wasn't about the cabin anymore, it was about my name. The story was out there, just not the truth. Somewhere between the broken wine glasses and Gail's sobbing retreat, they'd managed to twist the narrative. Now I was the villain, the ungrateful son, the selfish one who threw his family out into the cold over just a vacation home. I wasn't surprised, but it still stung. By the time I got back to the cabin, the messages had started. First came Gail. crying, gasping, her voice ragged but laced with that cutting undertone she always reserved for guilt trips. You humiliated your mother in front of everyone. Then Wade. Short. Sharp. Meet me tonight. No more games. Delaney, always the knife with a smile, sent. Seriously. You think you're better than us now? It's just a cabin. It was a familiar choreography. Paint me as dramatic, push just enough shame to disorient me. Then demand I come back into the fold and make it right. Their version of right, of course, meant silence, compliance, and pretending none of it happened. But I wasn't dancing anymore. That evening a call came from a number I hadn't saved in years. A distant cousin. Friendly tone, fake concern. Hey man, look, I'm not getting in the middle, but a son treating his parents like that, just think about how it looks. Not long after, a message from one of Gail's old church friends. Your mother is heartbroken. She's not eating. Please don't be so cruel. That's when it hit me. If they couldn't come through the door, they'd come through the crowd. They weren't just trying to guilt me, they were building a public case. If they could weaponize enough sympathy, they didn't need facts. All they needed was a story that felt true to everyone else. Mara saw it too. That night she pulled out her notebook and we started organizing. Not just files evidence. We listed out every layer of what we had. Video clips of the party, of the taunts, the chants, the laughter about me being too soft to stop us. The sheriff's case number and the report filed when they were asked to leave. Photos, the overturned drawers, the Pride lockbox, the wine stain on the deed folder. Digital alerts, login attempts, credit warnings, time-stamped and archived. Junie joined us on a call. She promised she'd preserve the original metadata on every video in case we needed to prove time and location. Then she paused. There's something else, she said. I didn't think it mattered, but now I'm not sure. She sent over another clip, shorter, grainier, filmed through the cabin's side window just before things kicked off. In it, Tyson stood with his back turned, angled toward the cabinet drawer. He wasn't partying. He wasn't dancing. He was holding up his phone, snapping a photo of something inside. Seconds later, Delaney's voice whispered, "Got it. Send it to Mom." That was it. Not a theory, not paranoia. Proof. They weren't just being disrespectful. They were collecting, copying, building their own little dossier. That night, I stopped reacting like a son under attack. I started acting like a homeowner under siege. We changed every lock again. This time, not just digital codes, I hired a local locksmith and had every physical lock replaced. Deadbolts, mailbox, garage. I installed 2 security cameras, one aimed down the gravel road, the other above the front porch. Every vehicle, every approach, every attempt documented. I set up a logbook, handwritten. Every call, every message, every knock on the door. And then while cleaning the study, I found something that chilled me. In the trash beside the fireplace, buried under wadded napkins and confetti ribbon, was a crumpled piece of paper. I smoothed it out. It was a printout of the original email I received from my mortgage officer, the one confirming the closing date and final cabin purchase approval. I hadn't printed that. I never stored it here. Which meant someone had logged in, found it, printed it, and then tried to cover their tracks. It couldn't have been a mistake. That file was buried in a private folder inside my cloud storage. You wouldn't stumble onto it unless you knew what to look for. That was the last thread I needed. The next morning, Wade left me a voicemail. His voice was low measured but venomous. You don't meet me tonight, you're gonna regret it. Don't make your mother do something drastic. There it was. The mask dropped. It wasn't a request. It was a threat dressed in concern. I sat on the porch and looked out at the lake, the wind kicking up waves under the gray sky. Mara stepped out and sat beside me. I told her everything, every word, every piece. And we agreed. If they kept pushing, we'd push back. Not with screaming, not with gossip. With records, with facts. I didn't want to destroy anyone. I just wanted them to stop. To finally learn that I wasn't theirs to manipulate anymore. 3 days of silence would be enough for most people to cool off. Not them. For them, silence wasn't surrender, it was challenge. The third night, the wind off the lake came strong. The trees whispered like they knew something was coming. Around 11:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Front camera. I tapped into the feed and my blood ran cold. Headlights, cutting through the trees, creeping along the gravel. A familiar shape. It was Wade's SUV. Another set of lights followed behind. Delaney's compact car. Mara stood beside me at the monitor, jaw tight. "Do not go out there," she said firmly. "We don't engage unless it's safe. This is about evidence now." I nodded, heart thudding. They parked near the edge of the driveway. Two silhouettes stepped out along with a third, taller, slower. Grant. They weren't stumbling or shouting this time. They were coordinated, deliberate. Grant held something in his hand, a manila folder. Wade clutched a thick envelope. Delaney carried herself like a lawyer preparing for a courtroom. This wasn't a visit. This was a performance. I stayed inside, stepped into the living room and stood by the window. I didn't open the door. I didn't flinch. I raised my voice just enough to carry through the glass. "If you've got something to say, say it here." No one's coming inside. There was a pause. Then Gail's voice, soft, strained, came from behind them. She stepped into view, wrapped in a shawl like she'd just escaped a storm. "I'm your mother," she said. "I just want to talk." But before I could respond, her tone shifted. "If you don't open this door, I'll have to tell people what you've really done." There it was. The plea that masks a threat. I didn't respond. Wade stepped forward, next, his voice tight with frustration. "You bought this place behind our backs, after all we did. You think that's right?" He raised the envelope. "You forced our hand. We're here to fix what should have been a family decision." That was the giveaway. They weren't here for apologies. They were here to rewrite ownership, to plant seeds of legal doubt, to make it sound like I owed them a stake. I kept my voice steady. "The deed is in my name. The sheriff documented your removal. The cameras are rolling. Every step you take is being logged." Wade flinched. Delaney on cue rolled her eyes. "God, you're so dramatic, still playing the victim." She stepped closer to the door. "You called the cops on your own mother. You think that makes you strong?" I stayed still. She wanted me to snap, wanted to yell, a shove, a crack in my tone. I gave her nothing. Instead, I spoke clearly. "From now on, all contact goes through Mara or in writing. Do not come here again. If you do, I will file for a no-contact order, and I will pursue charges." For a moment, the only sound was the wind through the pine trees. Then Wade looked up, and for the first time I saw it. Not regret. Strategy. He nodded once, like he'd taken the measure of the moment and filed it away. They turned back toward their cars. And I knew. They weren't finished. They were retreating to regroup. And if they had a final card to play, it would come when I least expected it, right when I thought I'd already won. It was quiet the next morning, too quiet. The lake wind cut sharp, the sky was pale steel, and the cabin felt still in a way that made me brace for impact. I wasn't afraid of them anymore, not like before. But I knew the game was changing. Not brute force this time, paperwork. Mara summed it up best: if they can't get in through the door, they'll try through your signature. A familiar car crunched up the gravel drive. My cameras caught it before I even reached the window. Wade and Gail out front, Delaney and Grant behind, and someone new, maybe a notary or some so-called representative with a thick envelope. I didn't open the door. I hit record and asked straight through the glass, "What do you want?" Wade held up a folder. "We're not trespassing. We're here to resolve a family matter." They claimed the cabin was tied to family interest, that they had a power of attorney, that they'd filed something to make me the problem for locking them out. The goal was clear: make it look like I was the one in the wrong if I didn't comply. I asked for three things: the original documents, the identity of whoever drafted or notarized them, and how they got my personal information. Mara, scanning the pages through the window, spotted red flags, forged signature-style wrong date formats, missing legal codes. She didn't flinch. "If this is real, we'll verify with the sheriff." You don't serve legal notices on porches. That's when my phone buzzed. A new credit inquiry, followed by a flagged identity verification email from a lender I'd never contacted. They weren't just pushing paper, they were trying to hijack my identity to force their way into the cabin or its value. I called the sheriff right there, citing our old case number. The same people are back with suspicious documents. I need a deputy to verify. Delaney tried provoking me, raised her voice, filmed selectively, called me unstable. But I saw it for what it was, a trap. They didn't need to break in, they just needed footage of me losing control. Then came the crack. Tyson, who'd kept quiet all along, texted Mara. "This has gone too far." He confessed Delaney had pulled my address from an old shared account. They'd planned the entry. He sent a screenshot from the family group chat, "Grab the lock code, copy any docs, I'll handle the notary part." When the deputy arrived, we laid it all out, the fake paperwork, the footage, the credit alerts. He took statements, confirmed ownership, and ordered them off the property. This wasn't just another visit, it was now documented escalation. As they left, I knew their last card had been played. But the final move was mine. I wasn't just holding the cabin anymore, I was about to end the game. The next morning, I sat by the window light, dancing across the lake. The cabin wasn't a hiding place anymore. It was mine. Not because I fought for it, but because I finally stopped running. Mara and I compiled everything into a clean dated file. Videos of the party, photos of torn drawers, login alerts and flagged credit pulls, deputy statements, Tyson's screenshot of their messages. We weren't building a case to argue, we were building truth that couldn't be twisted. I froze my credit, set fraud alerts, changed every password, secured the locks. This time it wasn't fear driving me, it was clarity. I wasn't defending my space. I was reclaiming my life. I sent one message to the family, short, formal, and final: no more visits. No more contact. Any attempt will be reported as harassment. Mara helped me keep the tone neutral. No emotion, no loopholes. Tyson confirmed how they got in. Delaney used an old account to find my address and dig for access codes. Gail called in a favor to pull transaction records. Grant had snapped a photo of the backup key code months ago. It didn't matter which of them crossed the line, they all stood behind it. When they came back one last time, I didn't flinch. I logged the visit, called the sheriff, and let the system speak. When a call came through, I ignored it, saved it, filed it, closed the file. Junie held on to the original footage. Tyson never became a hero, but he told the truth. That was enough. And one quiet evening, I hung the keys back in place, folded the throw blanket over the couch, and locked the door, not out of fear, but with certainty. I didn't need their apology, I didn't need validation. Because in the end, what I reclaimed wasn't just the cabin, it was my boundary. And no one walks through that without my permission again. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is walk away quietly with your dignity intact. This wasn't the ending I imagined when it all began. I didn't expect silence to feel like closure or paperwork to feel like protection. I thought justice would look like a courtroom or a public apology, maybe even someone finally saying we were wrong. But the truth is, justice doesn't always come with a spotlight. Sometimes it arrives in the form of boundaries you no longer apologize for. What they did hurt. Not just because it was cruel or manipulative, but because it came from people who once knew how I took my coffee, how I laughed, how I folded notes in middle school. People who were supposed to see me, not size me up like property. But here's what I've learned: just because someone shares your blood doesn't mean they share your heart. And maybe that's what growing up really means, realizing that you don't owe anyone unlimited access to you just because of history. Love, even family love, has to be earned and maintained, not demanded through guilt or power plays. I don't pretend this was easy. There were days I wanted to scream, to throw open that door and give them a piece of my mind. But every time I didn't, every time I chose stillness over spectacle, I reclaimed a little piece of myself they thought they'd worn down. And by the end, I wasn't hiding anymore. I was home. That cabin, what it became, isn't just wood and walls. It's a line in the sand, a place where the story changed, where I stopped reacting and started deciding, where the fear they built inside me unraveled one door lock at a time. So if you've ever felt cornered by people who refuse to respect your no, Let this story remind you, you don't have to fight louder. You just have to stand firmer. Protecting your peace doesn't make you heartless. It makes you whole. Some stories leave us with more than answers, they leave us with a quiet kind of clarity. What we just heard wasn't about winning or proving anything to anyone. It was about reclaiming peace without needing permission. About closing a door not in anger, but in understanding that not every bond deserves to stay tied forever. We all carry relationships that once felt unshakable, until they started to shake us. And when that happens, the most courageous thing isn't confrontation, it's choosing stillness. Choosing to walk away without slamming the door. Choosing to protect what's left of ourselves not out of pride, but out of respect for the life we want to live from here on out. If you've ever stood at that kind of threshold, we hope this story gave you a little company. If you feel like leaving a few words below, know they're always welcome here. And if you'd like to be part of a space where real stories like this are held and heard, you're invited to subscribe. Not as a number, but as someone who gets it. Thanks for spending time with us today. Until next time, take care of your heart and each other.